Tonight, a historic and highly anticipated matchup just hours away.
She's not a good debater. She's not a smart person.
If you got something to say it to my face.
Former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris coming face to face for the first time ever, preparing to battle it out on the debate stage.
Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking.
I'm
speaking.
The former president hoping to derail Harris's momentum. Will he revert to personal attacks?
Just don't ever use the word smart with me.
No puppet. No puppet. And it's pretty clear.
You're the puppet.
It's pretty.
Or deliver another knockout punch?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either.
In an unscripted test for Vice President Harris, will she be able to clearly define herself and her policy while going on the offense against Trump?
Donald Trump does not care about border security. He only cares about himself.
Over the course of 90 minutes, the two will face off over key issues, including the economy, abortion rights, immigration, and two wars overseas. With millions watching, how will the candidates use this opportunity to appeal to undecided voters?
Comrade Harris, you're fired. Get out of here.
As both campaigns enter the home stretch of an extremely tight race, this high-stakes moment couldn't come at a more critical time.
Well, Tim and I have a message for Trump. We're not going back.
Could this debate shift the state of the race for the White House once again?
From NBC News, countdown to the presidential debate. Live from Philadelphia, here's Tom Llamas.
And good evening. In less than 2 hours, millions will see Vice President Harris and former President Trump go head-to-head. We are live tonight from the spin room just around us here, a few blocks away from the debate hall. This room will be packed when the debate is over. Surrogates from both sides making their case of who won this showdown. And we want to take a live look at the debate hall right now. This is where that showdown is going to take place. This, of course, the spin room right here, as I was talking about that earlier. The stage is set and the countdown is on. Former President Trump and Vice President Harris will stand behind the podiums. That's a live look right now at the set of what is going to happen and where the debate is going to take place. The two podiums side by side there. Former President Trump won the virtual coin toss, so his campaign chose to select the order of closing statements, and they decided on having the final word. That means that Vice President Harris got to select podium placement. She will appear on the right and Trump on the left. Here are some of the ground rules for tonight's debate. The debate will be 90 minutes with 2 commercial breaks. There will be no live audience. Microphones will be muted when a candidate is not talking. No pre-written notes will be allowed, and campaign staff cannot interact with the candidates. So these are just some of the rules. There is a lot on the line tonight, and what could be the most watched moment with just 55 days to go until the election. At this point, it's anyone's race. New polling shows the two locked in a dead heat, these results falling within the margin of error. But we're also tracking another breaking story at this hour. Tropical Storm Francine, look at it right here, is barreling towards the Gulf Coast and is expected to intensify into a hurricane. The storm taking aim at New Orleans, which is now under a hurricane watch. The outer bands already lashing at the coastline, the region bracing for life-threatening storm surge, flash flooding, and destructive winds. Let's get right to NBC meteorologist Bill Cairns with the latest track and the timing. So, Bill, walk us through what we can expect and the latest on the storm.
Yeah, Tom, 24 hours from now, we will be talking about the landfall of the storm somewhere in Louisiana, south of New Orleans. And a couple of things have changed today. First off, the storm did not get as strong as anticipated. It's still trying, but it sucked in some dry air. So that's why it's still only a tropical storm. It should become a hurricane later on tonight into early tomorrow morning. And then it will have all day tomorrow before landfall to try to intensify. So right now, 65-mile-per-hour winds. The Hurricane Center forecast does have it getting up to a strong Category 1, maybe a low-end Category 2 at that landfall, which will be sometime likely right around maybe 5 to 9 p.m. local time here in southern Louisiana. So now we're trying to pinpoint what communities are going to get the worst wind damage, and that's will be near the center of the storm. The black line is the Hurricane Center forecast, but notice a lot of the lines are to the right of that, towards Morgan City or Houma, near Laplace. All of a sudden, we're getting closer to New Orleans here. So in between Baton Rouge and New Orleans is most likely a heavily populated area is going to have to go through the core of this storm, which will mean a lot of power power outages guaranteed no matter what path this storm takes. Max wind gusts will be up there somewhere between 60 to 70, maybe 80 miles per hour. Of course, with all the rain, it poured again today. It's poured last week, and now we're going to get an additional 3 to 8 inches in this area, maybe up to a foot isolated. So we're going to have significant river flooding and flash flooding issues. And then, of course, we also, Tom, with all these storms, we get storm surge issues too, 5 to 10 feet to the right of that center. So the big wild card, how strong can this storm get in the next 24 hours over the warm waters of the northern Gulf of Mexico?
Bill, I was going to ask you about that ground there in southern Louisiana. And as you said, it is saturated right now, which is sort of a worst case scenario for them. The good news is that this is not one of the most powerful hurricanes to hit New Orleans, at least not in the last decade. I do want to ask you, sometimes people can be taken surprise by these hurricanes. How much time did emergency responders have and meteorologists have to sort of track this hurricane or this tropical storm as it came up the Gulf Coast?
Yeah, this is not a storm that's out in the Atlantic that took 7 days to get here, and we were talking about it forever. This just formed 2 days ago in the Gulf. So when storms form close to the U.S. coastline, Tom, emergency managers don't get as much prep time as they would like. But that's our reality when we have so much coastal area for the eastern United States. These storms can form right along the coast. So, 48 hours hopefully is enough time, especially since this one's not going to be a major hurricane.
All right, Bill Caron's leading us off here. All right, Bill, we're watching two big stories, obviously, that hurricane forming there in the Gulf and, of course, the debate. With Francine taking aim at Louisiana, I want to turn now to Jesse Kirsch, who's actually tracking the storm from a rainy New Orleans tonight. Jesse, talk to us about if people are taking this storm seriously out there in southern Louisiana. They're very used to storm systems. They get hit with storms all summer. Are they taking this one seriously?
Yeah, no question they are, Tom. We saw people lining up in their cars around the block at a city sandbag distribution earlier today. And just piggyback off of what our colleague Bill Cairns was just talking about there, the lack of time to be able to prepare here compared to other storms, right? How quickly this thing is developing and getting to shore. Someone from the city council here in New Orleans told me that city sandbag distribution began today. Just gives you an idea. Again, we're talking about landfall expected sometime late tomorrow, right? So the day before, that's when the city sandbag distribution began. And that just speaks to the short time frame from development of the storm to getting people the opportunity to be able to prepare here. I spoke with someone who was collecting sandbags for his family. He said their plan was to bunker down. They were going to have people over for a hurricane party, effectively, is how he put it. That's something that people, do when they live in these kinds of storm zones. And that's what officials want people to do, is to be staying indoors. Officials here in New Orleans are stressing for people to finish their preparations ahead of the storm tonight, Tom.
Yes, we were down there in 2021 when Hurricane Ida slammed into Louisiana. It came ashore as a Category 4, obviously a much larger storm than what we're talking about with Francine, but it did so much damage to the infrastructure, right? Electricity was out for weeks, I think almost a month, in certain suburbs around New Orleans. What's the biggest concern with Francine?
Yeah, so what we're looking at with Francine is the potential for 3 to 5 feet of storm surge, flooding, and even possibly tornadoes as we're waiting for landfall tomorrow here in New Orleans, Tom. However, like you mentioned, this is a very different storm. You can hear we're starting to get the wind gusts picking up here. And again, we are about a day from landfall, according to our colleague Bill. But to the point about Category 4 for Ida, this is expected to be around a Category 1 storm. So we're looking about much weaker wind gusts from this storm. And additionally, this storm is not expected to linger. It is expected to sweep across Louisiana relatively quickly, and that means there won't be as much rainfall dumping on this region, Tom.
All right, Jesse Kirsch and his team there in New Orleans waiting for landfall of Tropical Storm Francine, which we think will become a hurricane very soon. We thank you for that. We're going to stay monitoring that storm, but we're going to return now to our special coverage of the presidential debate between Vice President Harris and former President Trump. I want to bring in my good friends Peter Alexander and Haake and Burns, who have been following both these campaigns closely. Peter, I'm going to start with you. What have you been hearing from the Harris campaign ahead of tonight's showdown?
Well, the best sort of direct line we have to Kamala Harris right now is actually through President Biden. We heard from him just a short time ago saying that he spoke to Kamala Harris. In his words, she is calm, cool, and collected. He said he gave her some advice, wouldn't share what that is, but said that she's going to do great. You can see right now we're in the spin room where a lot of Kamala Harris's allies and Donald Trump's alike are going to sort of spin this in favor of their candidate no matter what happens here this evening. We know how she's been preparing over the course of the last several days, spending a lot of that time here in the state of Pennsylvania, specifically in Pittsburgh, where she was hunkered down with her team. They did a series of mock debate sessions, including a stage and TV lighting to give her that real experience that she will have when she's up on stage this evening. We know about a coin flip that's already taken place. Donald Trump won that. He'll deliver the last closing statement this evening. For Harris's part, though, she has watched, Tom, some of the past debates that Donald Trump has done. For her, it's her first general election presidential debate. This is actually his 7th. Of course, he did one with Joe Biden about 3 months ago. So a lot that's gone into this, watching the tapes, preparing for what she's going to say. And really one of the challenges, as we're told, is to sort of shrink your message into those 2-minute increments, Tom, that you get to try to communicate best to the American audience.
Yep, so many looking forward to this debate. All right, Peter, we thank you for that. Dasha, anything from the Trump side? Talk to us about his priorities here, right? I got to think that the #1 priority is to try to slow that Harris momentum she's gotten ever since she reached the top of the ticket and coming out of her convention.
Well, yeah, that's exactly right, Tom. His campaign is hoping that this marks the end of that honeymoon period that they believe she's been having. And look, the former president is focused on, his campaign's been preparing him to try to tie Harris to the Biden administration, try to feel accountable for the economy, for immigration, for some of the issues that voters have expressed frustration and that they've expressed that they feel that former President Trump is doing better on than Harris. The other thing that we're likely to see him try to do tonight, Tom, is remind voters some of what Harris said back in 2020, some of the positions she held when she was running for president back then that were further to the left than she is now. She's taken a more centrist position. He wants to try to paint her as just too liberal for some of those middle-of-the-road moderate swing voters that both of them are after right now. And the former president hasn't been doing the sort of mock debates, the intensive prep that Harris has been doing. But over the last couple of days, he has been hunkered down at Mar-a-Lago. He has become a little bit more serious about preparing, and he tells our Garrett Haake that he is feeling great. Tom?
All right, Dasha Burns and Peter Alexander, we thank you both in the spin room. We're going to be checking in with you throughout the night. For an inside look right now at how Kamala Harris is preparing for tonight's high-stakes debate, I'm joined now by one of her close friends and allies, California Senator Laphonza Butler. Butler has known the vice president for 15 years, meeting her for the first time when Harris was district attorney of San Francisco and served as a senior advisor to her 2020 presidential campaign. Senator, we thank you so much for being here tonight. I was watching you looking at the pictures over the years. You smiled. You helped her prepare in 2020. How do you think she's preparing tonight?
Look, the vice president is taking this debate so seriously. I think that she is preparing with the kind of intention to speak to the American people directly about the kind of leadership that she wants to offer, the plans that her and Governor Walz would like to implement in response to so much that's going on in American families. And she is probably making sure that she's aware of all of the tactics and methods that former President Trump has debated with before.
Is she somebody that researches, that practices? You think she's been watching videos? I mean, does she really get into the prep?
She does. Look, she is a trained prosecutor. And so when you have someone's life in your hands, you actually take the time to gather all the facts. And that is what she's been doing. And I think we're going to see a debate that is about the issues important to the American people tonight.
So former President Trump likely to try to throw her off her game on issues like immigration, the economy, what's happening in places like Gaza and Ukraine. What are you worried about and what are you confident about when it comes to those issues?
Look, I am confident that the vice president is going to be ready tonight to talk to the American people. I am not worried about the former president's intention to throw her off her game. She is a mission-focused public servant, and I think that what I'm looking forward to is the invitation to those Americans who have not yet made up their mind, and her speaking directly to those folks.
Senator, you mentioned that she's a former prosecutor, and some have said, some may be smarter than me have said that she's good at asking questions. She's not great at answering questions. She had this moment in the 2020 debates with Representative Tulsi Gabbard that I want to play for our viewers right now. Let's watch it. It's about a minute from that debate, and I want to get your reaction on the other end.
Sure.
Now, Senator Harris says she's proud of her record as a prosecutor and that she'll be a prosecutor president, but I'm deeply concerned about this record. There are too many examples to cite, but she put over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations and then laughed about it when she was asked if she ever smoked marijuana. She blocked evidence. She blocked evidence that would have freed an innocent man from death row until the courts forced her to do so. She kept people in prison beyond their sentences to use them as cheap labor for the state of California. And she fought to keep cash bail system in place that impacts poor people in the worst kind of way.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Senator Harris, your response.
As the elected Attorney General of California, I did the work of significantly reforming the criminal justice system of a state of 40 million people, which became a national model for the work that needs to be done. And I am proud of that work.
So we know that Representative Tulsi Gabbard is working with former President Trump in his debate prep, however he describes that debate prep. How do you think she'll react with a moment like that when it's not Tulsi Gabbard, but when it's somebody maybe even louder, like a former President Trump?
I think she's going to respond quite strong. This is a moment where we have seen in every debate that the former president has done, he's deeply experienced at it. There is a series of untruths that just come out at a torrent pace. I think the vice president is going to be very clear about what is the point that she wants to make to the American people. She's not going to be a fact checker. She's going to be a truth teller. And that's what we can expect from the vice president's performance tonight.
Some people have pointed out, especially Republicans, that the vice president has evolved on a lot of issues, right? Issues like fracking, issues like the border. And I remember in that 2020 campaign, you know, the progressives had a sort of stranglehold in the primaries on the party. And I don't want to say she ran from her record, but she wasn't leaning into the prosecutor side. She is now in a big way because crime is an issue in some parts of the country. Which Kamala Harris do you think we're going to see tonight?
You're going to see the exact same Kamala Harris that I've known for almost 15 years, someone who centers people, everyday people, at the center of her public service. She is, and I think we're going to again see tonight the kind of Kamala Harris and in her vice presidency that has been focused on what she can do for the most good, for the most people. And we are going to see a confident vice president who is prepared to move our country forward beyond the politics of hate and division that can actually unify us towards a future that our generations deserve.
I'm seeing in our research from our great top story team that you spoke to Vice President Harris the day that President Biden stepped aside around that time. What can you tell our viewers about that conversation?
Look, I have known the vice president for many years, and what I will say of that conversation is her commitment to the American people in a moment that was unexpected for her, but definitely she was ready to step in to this leadership. She's never backed down from a challenge. She's never backed down from an opportunity to serve the American people.
Senator, get your crystal ball out. If your friend Vice President Harris wins, would you accept a position in her cabinet? Is there a position you'd want to work in her cabinet?
My focus is on winning this November, and if she came to you, my friend, and asked you to take a position in the cabinet, I'm sure you would consider it.
No, I would say I'm very happy at NBC. No, I would not say that. But Senator Butler, we thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Have a good debate, and we'll talk to you after, I'm sure. All right, for more on this debate, Meet the Press moderator Kristen Welker joins our special coverage live now. First things first, Kristen, you have moderated these debates. You know how hard they are, right? The microphones here are going to be muted. Only the moderators are allowed to ask questions. And as far as we know, there's not going to be real-time fact-checking. Does that make this a little easier to moderate? And is that better for the debate?
Well, look, the fact that the mics are going to be muted, we saw that during the June debate between former President Trump and President Biden, who was at the top of the ticket at the time. It certainly makes for a debate that is more in line. You, of course, don't have that crosstalk that you typically get. Now, you could argue that's a good thing. You could argue that's not such a good thing. The Harris campaign is arguing, hey, they wanted the mics to be unmuted so that she could engage in real time. What's, of course, notable is that it was the Biden campaign initially that asked for the mics to be muted, asked for there not to be an audience. But look, if you talk to some Democratic strategists, they believe that the mics being muted actually has helped Trump to look more presidential. So what will we see tonight? If there's a whole lot of crosstalk, Tom, I'll be curious to see if they actually unmute those microphones so that we can hear what they're saying. In terms of it being easier, I would not say that moderating any debate is easy. It is an immense amount of preparation. And then the challenge for the moderators, really, Tom, is to make sure that they're getting answers to their questions. So making sure that if they don't hear an answer, there are follow-up questions to try to really pin down and drill down on what they've asked. So I think that's going to be the challenge for the moderators tonight, Tom.
Kristen, what do you think a win looks like for both candidates?
Great question. Look, I think for former President Trump, I've been talking to a lot of his allies. They say they want him to stay focused on the policies. They want him to stay focused on tying Kamala Harris to the Biden record. They don't want him to engage in personal attacks. You saw former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley very forceful on that over the weekend and saying, look, stop attacking her personally because, in her own words, even Republican women get their backs up when they hear those kinds of personal attacks. I also think a big win for him would be if he can address more directly the issue of reproductive rights. Where does he stand specifically? His stock answer is sort of that this is an issue for the states, but will he give more detail about where exactly he stands? As for Vice President Kamala Harris, look, she's got to explain, I think, in more detail. And if you talk to her allies, some of those flip-flops that she's had from when she was a candidate back in 2019 until becoming the vice presidential nominee with Joe Biden, and now, of course, the sitting vice president. And then the big one, Tom, will she lay out for voters how a Harris administration would be different from a Biden administration? This may be her biggest challenge because she can't completely distance herself from the Biden agenda. She is a part of the administration, but a win, if you talk to her allies, is for her to make a case, create a vision in which she talks about the ways in which things would look different under a Harris administration, Tom.
Kristen Welker, I know we're going to be hearing from you all night long. We appreciate you joining our special coverage. For more on what we can expect from both candidates tonight, I want to bring in our political pros. Senator Claire McCaskill, who represented the great state of Missouri and is now an NBC News political analyst. Tricia McLaughlin, she's a former senior advisor and communications director on the Vivek Ramaswamy campaign. Hogan Gidley, former White House principal deputy press secretary during the Trump administration. And Michael Starr Hopkins, a Democratic strategist and former staffer on the Clinton and Obama campaigns. We thank you all for being here. Senator McCaskill, I'm going to start with you. So we've done one, if you're the Harris team, you've done one big interview with CNN, right, since you got to the top of the ticket. No town halls, a lot of campaigning, but no unscripted moments. I got to think the pressure is on for her because this is the first time that Americans are going to have to see her really full frontal without any script.
Yeah, I think she'll do more interviews. I don't think the lack of a script is a problem for her. Listen, the best training ground for not having a script is a courtroom. Speaking as someone who did exactly what she did for many years, there is no script in the courtroom. You don't know what your witnesses are going to say. You don't know how the judge is going to rule. You don't know when you have to pivot. You don't know when you're going to have to, adjust to something on the fly.
Yeah.
She knows how to do this. I don't think that's going to be the problem. I think the bigger problem is how she can be dismissive of him and make him smaller on the stage and make herself stronger.
You know, Tricia, I want to show you the latest national poll we have, which was the New York Times Siena poll, right? I'll put this up for our viewers here. And the survey here, and the Pew Research Center as well, you can see how deadlocked this race is. Both have this race essentially a dead heat, either well within the margin of error. And yet there's a very different debate stage from the one Trump faced in June. Now he's the older candidate. He's facing someone who has more energy, someone he's never debated before. How do you think that throws him off his game?
Well, the issue of the age, I understand that that's this new attack line, but this is a guy who weeks ago was just shot in the ear and then got up and said, fight, 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 and then went on to go every night, long days, long nights, to the Republican National Convention. I mean, I think that he really shows some energy. I thought the crosstabs, though, of those polls were very interesting. It actually showed that only a third of Americans that think he's too far right versus half of Americans think Kamala Harris is too far left. He is the centrist candidate going into this debate.
Claire, I'm going to let you do the rebuttal on that.
that one.
That's the fact. I mean, listen, he's not a centrist candidate. No. And the point is he's not trying to be a centrist candidate. He's never really reached beyond his base. And she, on the other hand, I think has a real opportunity to get an edge with independent voters and soft Republicans, people who don't like his foreign policy, don't like his plan for the economy. When you got Goldman Sachs saying that her economic plan is going to be better for the economy than his, that tells you something.
Hogan, I want to turn to you now, and if we can roll the video of the debate between former President Trump and President Biden. Hogan, I noticed something during this debate, right? So Biden comes out. It's clear he's having a bad night. And at some point, former President Trump realizes this, and he starts to sort of look over at Biden while Biden is answering. And they have the split screen there, right? This was the debate on CNN. And you could see that it's sort of Trump realizes that Biden's having a very, very bad night. And he sort of controls himself, at least in the beginning of the debate. Do you think he's going to be able to control himself in this debate as well if he sees opportunities?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, it's no secret Kamala Harris is going to try to get under his skin. The job for Donald Trump here is to remind everybody about his record, while Kamala Harris's job is try to make everyone forget about hers. He needs to stay on message. He needs to expose her for the radical she is. He needs to make sure the American people remember just how successful, how good it was, how you could afford gas and groceries. The border was closed. You had no wars breaking out all over the world. That's his job tonight. I think he's going to have a really good opportunity to do it. But it's pretty clear Kamala Harris has a history of being prepared for these. She's been in office basically for 20 years. She's not new. She's not fresh. She's kind of old at this point in political years for sure. Donald Trump's still the newcomer. She'll be ready. She'll have her canned one-liners. She'll have her contrived lines, her stories that are made up. She'll do all of that because she's done it in the past. She'll use that to try and goad Donald Trump into going down rabbit holes. If he doesn't and sticks to what the American people care about, he's going to have a good night.
Michael, I want to show you one of the crosstabs of the New York Times and CNN College poll we mentioned earlier here. When asked how well voters feel they know the candidates, 28%, almost 3 in 10 said they needed to know more about Kamala Harris. Just 9% said the same about Trump. How does she win this debate but also sort of introduce herself to a large portion of the electorate?
Well, it's one of Donald Trump's biggest problems. He's really squeezed all the juice out of his base. And so he's hardened his numbers. But the problem is he hasn't been able to hit 50%, while Kamala Harris has. And so she still has room to grow. And what she needs to do tonight is, while Donald Trump is going to, try to goad her, try to be really unprofessional and undisciplined, she's got to talk to voters. She's got to remind voters that when Donald Trump was in charge, there were, 20 million Americans who lost their jobs. There was 1 million Americans who died. Donald Trump wanted to slash Medicare, Medicaid, the ACA. He wanted to, increase our deficit by $8 trillion. These are all things that happened under his administration that I think a lot of Americans have forgotten. And so it's her job to remind them.
Senator McCaskill, the two campaigns agreed on the rules. These mics are going to be muted. The Harris-Walz campaign trying to change that afterwards. How much of an advantage do you think this does give former President Trump?
I'm not sure it's a huge advantage. I think the back and forth that he does gets, especially on women's nerves. We all know guys
so that would be an advantage to him because it helps him, doesn't it?
Every woman knows a man like Donald Trump who minimizes women, who says horrible things about women, who marginalizes them. And so it being muted helps him. But I don't think it's anything that's going to hold her back.
Tricia, former President Trump has argued he has the right to get personal with Vice President Harris, that she's called him weird, that she sort of opened the door for these attacks. Do you think he'll go down that road in this debate tonight?
I think anyone has the right to go personal. It doesn't make you successful, and it's not helpful. I think that he knows Kamala Harris is going to prosecute Donald Trump, the man, Donald Trump's character. He needs to prosecute her record, what she said in 2019 during the primary debate, what she did throughout the administration, whether it be the economy, inflation, voting for that Inflation Reduction Act, which now we know, because Biden said so, it is actually a climate agenda piece of legislation. Also immigration. That is a big deal that the American people want to know about. And lastly, fracking. Pennsylvania's voters want to know, where does she stand on this issue?
Yeah, but that's the big question. Will he be disciplined and focused enough to get her there?
He's got to prosecute the case.
Put the spotlight on the issues for her. Michael, I do want to ask you, she was able to hold her own during the vice presidential debates 4 years ago with Mike Pence. Mike Pence, as we know, is a much different person than former President Trump. What are you concerned about, right? As a Democrat, what are you concerned about happening at this debate if Trump sort of sees an advantage, if he sees a way forward, and he's able to kind of get either under her skin or get an advantage in this debate?
Yeah, I, like Claire, started my career out in the courtroom, and one of the worst things you could do was either ask a question that you didn't know the answer to or allow a witness to really pull you off your script and get you off your game. And so I think the one thing she's really got to focus on is not getting in that back and forth with him, not responding, sticking to the issues like abortion, about democracy, talking about what the impact of a Trump presidency will really look like. She's got to put her vision forward and make sure that she doesn't get engaged in this back and forth that he's been so famous at getting people to do on stage.
Hogan, I do want to ask you, how important do you think this debate is?
Very. I think this is the first time Donald Trump's really had a debate of this nature. Obviously, they never even met before. Kamala Harris has never been on this stage either. As I said, she's been doing this for 25 years. She's been in debates, too. But it's been a long time for both folks actually sitting down and going toe-to-toe with another person, especially on issues like this, when so much is in the balance. We see these races decided by just tens of thousands of votes across a few states. So it's going to matter to the American people. All eyes will be on this, especially since Kamala Harris hasn't done really anything with the media. No one does know her, as the poll you just put out shows. So it's incumbent upon Donald Trump to explain that, expose it. But at the same time, both candidates understand what is at stake tonight. They have a chance to either grow a lead or sink in the polls based on what happens.
Hogan Gidley, Michael Starr Hopkins, Tricia McLaughlin, Senator Claire McCaskill, we thank you all for being here in our special coverage. Still ahead tonight, more coverage of the presidential debate continues live from Philadelphia. With the race neck and neck, both candidates are hoping this debate will help them win over undecided voters. What will they say tonight to help them make up their minds? We all have much more from Philadelphia. Stay with us. We are back now live in Philadelphia. Look at that. What a beautiful shot at the first presidential debate between Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump. This debate could be the tipping point for undecided voters watching all across this country. NBC News Daily anchor Kate Snow joins us now live from Southampton, Pennsylvania, where she's spending the night with undecided female voters. Kate, I want to start with some poll numbers, right? Southampton is in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. Battleground county we always watch. The county President Joe Biden won by just over 17,000 votes in 2020. When he won the state, Hillary Clinton won the county by just about 2,000, but would go on to lose the state at large. So this is a closely contested county and a critical swing state. What are you hearing from the voters you're talking to tonight?
Yeah, well, I'm actually going to introduce you to a couple of them. And just to correct you, Tom, they're not all women. I've got a guy standing next to me. We've got Andrew with us. We've got Hannah with us. And they have very graciously agreed to talk about the fact that they are undecided. You guys are both not sure at all who you're going to vote for. So you've agreed to kind of sit and watch the debate with us together tonight. Tom was just laying out that Bucks County is kind of a divided place, right? And it's funny, a lot of the people we've been talking to as we've been trying to find undecided voters are really made up. They've made up their minds. And people are surprised that there even are undecided voters. Andrew, why are you so undecided? Like, why don't you know who you want to pull the lever for?
I voted for Trump in 2016, and I don't think he lived up to any of his promises. I think he lied. Harris, I don't trust a lot of what she says. She's changed her opinion. An ACLU survey came out yesterday or the day before, and her policies seem very far left. And I don't agree with any of them.
Yeah,
so.
you were telling me before you see some of that as kind of the woke thing.
Yes.
You feel like that's gone a little too far. So
yes.
You're right in the middle. And you're listening for what tonight? What do you want to hear?
A middle ground from either policy, from either candidate to return to the middle. Instead of far right or far left, I would like a middle ground so we can all move forward.
Hannah, you're similar in some ways, and you voted for Trump in 2016, right? And then you voted for Biden in 2020.
Yes.
So you were telling me you feel like you just want somebody to explain something in this debate that can actually happen.
Yes.
Is that right?
Realistic policy, something that they can actually get done through legislation.
Yeah.
You know, instead of making this debate or this presidential race a spectacle, it would be nice to actually see them speak to us instead of focusing on, just their specific parties and, saying the buzzwords that the people they know who are going to vote for them want to hear.
And
what are you going to say to us, the people who aren't
I know you were
decided?
concerned about the tone, too. Like you said to me, you don't like the name calling.
No, why be disrespectful? There's no reason for it. You can agree to disagree, and you can have a discourse through conversation, but ultimately the goal of our government, regardless of what you believe in, is to get things done that benefit the people. And we're seeing none of that because of the chaos that is our government right now.
You see just intransigence, like people not crossing the aisle, not doing anything bipartisan.
There's not even an intention to.
Andrew, you own this place, I should say that. You own the restaurant that we're in. And you were telling me that you care a lot about both of you care a lot about the economy, a lot about inflation right now. As a business owner, you also said you care about immigration, and not the way that I thought you might say. You said you want immigration because you need workers.
I do. I need workers, and the high school kids will not work nowadays. They don't want to work. I don't know what they're doing, but they're not working. Years ago, I could get kids, 16, 17, 18 years old, to work, and they don't want to do it anymore. They don't come through the door. It doesn't matter what I pay.
Andrew, Hannah, thank you guys. We're going to sit here. We're going to watch. Tom, we're going to get back to you with their thoughts as the debate goes on.
All right, Kate, great to hear from those voters. We are live tonight from Philadelphia as we enter the final hours before the presidential debate. Coming up, we'll hear from former Republican presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy, what he thinks former President Trump will say on that debate stage. Much more of our special coverage just ahead. And welcome back. If you're just tuning in, we are live in Philadelphia. Look at that beautiful skyline right there. We are counting down to the first debate between Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Trump. We're going to have much more from the spin room in just a moment, plus a big interview. But we have some breaking news right now. Tropical Storm Francine has just strengthened to a hurricane as it takes aim at Louisiana. Here is a live look at the radar. As the storm churns in the Gulf Coast, the hurricane expected to make landfall in about 24 hours. Forecasters warning of life-threatening storm surge for the Louisiana and Mississippi coastlines. You can follow the latest, of course, on NBCnews.com. We're going to be tracking the hurricane throughout all of our special coverage. Okay, and ahead of the debate tonight, former President Trump has been reviewing policy positions and preparing with the help of key aides. Joining us now is former Republican presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy. Vivek, always great to see you. Thanks for joining our coverage.
It's good to see you.
I'm going to start with you. The goal right now, if you're a Republican, is to stop the momentum that the Harris-Walz ticket has, right? From getting to the top of the ticket to the convention to this moment right here. She's picked up a couple percentage points on the polls. How does former President Trump do that?
So first of all, I'll give you my frank assessment of where things do stand in the race. Yeah. She did have a lot of momentum coming out of the convention, even coming out of her announcement as the presumptive nominee. I do think a lot of that already has stalled, and it's stalled principally around issues of policy. Kamala Harris has been completely opaque about what her policy positions actually are. She stands in favor of a tax on unrealized capital gains. She hasn't explained exactly how that would function. Why has she changed her position on health care, on Medicare for all, on other areas like bans on fracking? So I hope tonight gives Americans and voters what they deserve, which is a clear picture of both candidates, where they stand on policy.
How does your candidate, former President Trump, put the spotlight on that evolution, on the issues, on the flip-flopping, as you guys call them? How does he stay disciplined and put that pressure on her, especially in a debate where you have the mics turned off and it's 2 minutes for you, 2 minutes for them?
So the reality is, with the mics turned off, a lot of this is going to fall on the moderators. I hope they do a good job. A lot of conservatives did have skepticism about CNN and their moderators being able to moderate a fair debate. I think they did last time around, and I'm rooting for that in the case of ABC as well. But I do think it's the job of not only the moderators, but also Donald Trump to focus on what his policies actually are. And I think Kamala Harris's own words are the friend of a Republican candidate here. Where Kamala Harris ran for president in the year 2020, she adopted positions that she is trying to run away from now. Those were short 4 years ago. So my best advice would be use her own words. You don't need to put words in her mouth. Just tell the public what she said. And if she's changed her mind, which it looks like she claims to have in many cases, she deserves to explain exactly why and what her new position is. She hasn't done that.
The issue of abortion is going to come up in this debate, no doubt. The Democrats definitely want to have that that conversation. You're somebody who speaks very frankly, right? You let people know exactly where you stand on issues. But when it comes to abortion rights, the 6-week ban in Florida, if you're a Republican voter, it's been a little confusing. Former President Trump has sort of been a little bit all over the place. Do you think he's been able to sort of telegraph, dictate his policy directly about where he stands on abortion? Because even some conservatives have been confused.
So, look, I think that President Trump has been crystal clear about one policy throughout, dating back to the primary. And I say this, I ran against him in the primary. Yeah. I know he was very clear about this then, as I was as well. He is against, and I share this position, he is against a federal ban on abortion. This is an issue for the states. Conservatives have long favored overturning Roe versus Wade. That happened with Dobbs. But then it would be inconsistent. It's my belief and President Trump's belief to say that this should be a federal issue. He's been crystal clear on that. And I want to say that part of that confusion comes from the fact that Kamala Harris has expressly stated, not once, but numerous times, that Donald Trump is in favor of signing a federal abortion ban. He's never said so. Right. To the contrary, he's actually taken a lot of criticisms from Republicans for that position.
That's sort of the easier part to understand, which I get that.
But the relevant part, because he's running for U.S. president, which is to lead the federal government, and that's his position, is that he's against a federal ban. That's what he's running for. He's not running for governor of one of the 50 states. His position is that's best an issue left for those 50 states, for local communities to decide what standards are best for them. That makes a lot of sense.
It's been a little confusing on the 6-week ban, right? Yeah. He's had different positions on that. He suggested to our own Haake and Burns that he was going to vote against the 6-week ban, and then he changed that position. And look, you can change your mind, but voters got to trust you.
So I don't think he changed his mind. I do think that was, with due respect, I think it was mischaracterized. Here's why.
He uses his own words, though. It's a direct question. So and he lives in Florida,
and
right?
I believe in the media asking tough questions of candidates. They've done that of him here. I wish they would do the same of Kamala, but that's a point for another day. Now, because he lives in Florida, I do think it was a fair question for the media asking him how he was going to vote. He has been consistent. He has been against that 6-week ban all the way back to the time it was signed into law. But here's what he said, and I think it's really important for viewers to understand this. We can't conflate being opposed to a 6-week ban with being in favor of everything this ballot measure would propose, which some legal scholars have said would even in certain cases allow for abortion all the way up to the time of birth. And he's against that as well. So conflating the Florida ballot measure
Democrats have
with the 6-week ban are two different issues. So you can at once be against that ballot measure and be against a 6-week ban. There's no inconsistency there, and that's been his position.
You've gotten to know former President Trump. You built a relationship with him. You never really know what's going to happen on this debate stage with him, right? How do you convince yourself, or are you convinced, you'll get that Donald Trump that will focus on the issues and maybe have a hearty debate like he had with President Biden, at least the first part of the debate, versus the Donald Trump who can be emotional, who can do personal attacks, who can talk about her looks?
Well, look, I'll say a few things here. First of all, I think he has done an outstanding job of answering questions of where he lands on policy, from tough questions, from AI to crypto policy, all the way to consistency on the border wall to energy policy. So I think he's well prepared. I spoke to him late last week. I spoke to him this morning. I think that he
What did he tell you?
Well, he's confident about where he is. And in fact, we didn't end up talking much about the debate. We ended up talking about other issues relating to the future of the country. And I think that tells you the kind of person that Donald Trump is. He doesn't follow anybody else's script. He doesn't show up with a bunch of pre-canned talking points. And I thought one of his best moments in that first debate against Joe Biden was actually towards the end of the debate. It got less attention, where he looked the camera in the eye and said, you know what? I don't have to be doing this. And I think it was true, and I think it landed because it came across as authentic. I think it was that he lived a good life, that he wouldn't be going through these prosecutions, but he's doing it not just because he wants to make America great again, but to make America greater than we've ever been. And I want to see that side of him come through tonight. And if he does that, I think that he will win over voters who otherwise may have some questions. If he allows the rest of this country to see the motivations that I know of him for why he's in this, for the betterment of the country, I think that'll be a win tonight.
Democrats have tried to pin Project 2025 on Republicans. Former President Trump's out there saying Vice President Harris is a Marxist. It hasn't seemed to stick like it did in 2020 with the Democrats. Republicans were able successfully to put that label on some of the Democratic candidates, especially Joe Biden, in places like Florida. Why do you think he's having a tougher time putting that Marxist label on Kamala Harris?
Well, I think there's a couple of things going on here. The media has been very protective of Kamala Harris.
But I've even heard you say that you don't think she's a Marxist.
Well, I think personally Kamala Harris, I'll give you my perspective here, so I'm speaking for myself here. I believe she's just another cog in the system. The reality is President Biden, Kamala Harris, they're part of the managerial class that in many ways her policy deficits and Biden's cognitive deficits Those were not bugs, they were features for the managerial class that really controls them. So I think if Kamala Harris wants to prove that she really is a candidate with an ideology, I think in some ways it's to give her too much credit to say she's ideological. Bernie Sanders has an ideology. I disagree with it. But at least he's been clear about what that is. Kamala Harris tried to run to the left of Bernie Sanders on single-payer health care, on bans on fracking and offshore drilling, said she favored an end to the filibuster to ram through the Green New Deal. Those aren't her positions now. To me, that's an indicative of a deeper problem of somebody who's just operating in a machine. And I think a good message for President Trump to deliver tonight, I know he believes it and I think it's true, is that we're not just running against a candidate, the one we'll see on stage tonight, which is a different candidate than we saw on stage a few months ago. We're really running against a machine that frankly exists in some element in both parties. But that's part of why you're seeing many Democrats also defect to join the Trump campaign as well. This is bigger than Republicans versus
Democrats defecting to join the Trump campaign.
You see Tulsi Gabbard, you see RFK, you see a range.
But you're also seeing Republicans like Dick Cheney, Liz Cheney on the other side. It goes both ways.
Well, actually, that makes my point, because this is not about Republicans versus Democrats. It's about that managerial class, that machine, the professional politician, the Dick Cheney to Liz Cheney to Kamala Harris to Joe Biden, versus outsiders who really want to come in and shake up the system.
Before you go, the last time we talked about potentially if the Trump advance ticket wins, there'll be a vacancy for the Senate in Ohio. That's where you're from. Are you still interested in that seat? Have those conversations gone anywhere? I know you've had lots of conversations, or a few, about cryptocurrency and the economy with the president as well. Where's your head right now if the Trump advance ticket does win?
Some leaders are focused on what happens between now and November. After November, and after hopefully a successful November 5th, we'll quickly turn to what's next for me. Few possibilities widely speculated on from the cabinet.
Is your heart still towards the Senate?
Well, look, I think that there's a lot of ways to impact the country, be it through the cabinet, through the Senate, through the governorship in Ohio. That's going to be what we turn to after November.
All right. Vivek Ramaswamy, we thank you as always for talking to us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Joining us now is someone who has shared a debate stage with Kamala Harris and will have a vastly different opinion than the man we just talked to. Julian Castro faced off with then Senator Kamala Harris in the 2020 primary debates. Before that, he served as the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development under President Obama, as well as the mayor of San Antonio, Texas. He's now an NBC News political analyst. So, Secretary, we thank you, first of all, for joining us and joining our special coverage here. Vice President Harris goes into this debate losing on a couple of critical issues, the economy, immigration. Voters trust Trump more with those. How does she respond, right, when he goes after her on those points?
Well, I think that to her credit, in her brief campaign, one of the things that she has done is close the gap with Trump on issues like immigration. If you look at the polling from over the summer when President Biden was the candidate to now, that gap is actually smaller. And she's done that by going on offense, talking about how she would ensure that we have a secure border, that we have order at the border, and then also, on the other hand, ensuring that we have a pathway to citizenship for folks who have earned it. So she's done both of those things, and she's seen her numbers on immigration go up. I think tonight is going to be all about two things. First of all, articulating a strong vision for the future of the country. She has put that out over the last few weeks. She also has a great American dream, personal success story to tell the American people. And then secondly, she needs to remind people about why they didn't like Donald Trump in the first place, why he lost the 2020 election. The good news is, as I've seen personally firsthand on the debate stage, she has a lot of poise, she has a lot of knowledge, she has the wherewithal, I think, to do a great job tonight on the issues, on the personal story, and on taking the case to Donald Trump.
So, you know, you've obviously won elections. You've done debates. You've been out there on the campaign trail. Vice President Kamala Harris and the Democrats have had a strategy of doing just one major sit-down. She hasn't done a lot of town halls. She's done, obviously, the convention, and she has big campaign rallies. But my question to you is there a danger in that? Because then when you get to a debate where there's no teleprompter, where there's no scripting, you know, there's really nowhere to go. Do you think she'll be okay on this debate stage tonight?
Oh, absolutely. I think she's going to do great. I mean, first of all, she does have plenty of experience. She was the DA of San Francisco. She was the Attorney General of California, Senator from California, candidate for president herself, vice president now. She has plenty of experience in high-pressure environments. She is an excellent debater, somebody who thinks well on her feet and can really resonate with the voters. I think one of the things that you saw very clearly, especially in that very first presidential debate that we witnessed in June of 2019, was that she doesn't get caught up in all of the back and forth and the antics of opponents. She really knows how to stay laser focused on what the voters are thinking about. That's going to be very useful tonight, because if there's one thing that we know about Donald Trump is that he tries to distract. He tries to create a circus, insulting the moderators, insulting his opponent, sometimes even insulting the voters, just to throw his opponent off, and also to distract the voters from the fact that he doesn't have any policy knowledge. Kamala Harris has to make sure that she stays focused on what the people want to know, her vision for the future, and remind them why they said no to Donald Trump in 2020.
You think it's a plus or a minus that nearly 30% of the electorate, at least in that last national poll from the New York Times and CNN, saying they want to know more information about her? Is that a plus or a minus?
Well, that all depends on what a candidate does with that. I think the good news for Vice President Harris is that she has a very compelling story. I mean, here's the daughter of hardworking immigrants who herself became a trailblazer, has a great track record that she can run on as part of the Biden-Harris administration. Millions and millions of new jobs created, more than any other administration in modern history, brought us back from the pandemic. They actually did an infrastructure investment. Trump talked about Infrastructure Week for 4 years. They did it. Bringing back American manufacturing, bringing the unemployment rate from over 6% now to about 4%. So there's a great story there. She just needs to tell it, and I think that she can do that effectively and close that gap of people who say that they want to learn more or they're not quite sure. So I think on net, that's going to be a positive for her. As people come to know her, she's going to gain support.
Julian, what does a victory for her tonight look like? I mean, is it, because Democrats have been trying to lower the bar, is it if she survives, or does she really have to get some shots in against former President Trump?
I think a victory for her tonight is to be able to articulate her vision for the future. Remember, what people were saying 2 months ago was that they were not satisfied with their choices. As much as I love President Biden, I think he's been a fantastic president. People were saying, look, we feel like we've been there and done that with both former President Trump and President Biden. Kamala Harris has this unique opportunity as the challenger, as the new kid on the block, if you will, but also a track record of impressive experience. I think a win for her tonight is really the ability to say how she's going to lift up the middle class, how she's going to continue the progress that's been made under the Biden-Harris administration, and also articulating new vision for the future of the country. She can do that and stay focused on what the voters want to know and hear instead of get caught up in Donald Trump's antics. I think that'll be a win.
Former Secretary Julian Castro. Julian, always great to see you. We thank you for joining our coverage.
Thank you.
All right, we are joined now by our political pros, Shira Stein. She's a Washington correspondent for the San Francisco Chronicle. Don Calloway, he's a Democratic strategist and host of the Caucus Room podcast. And Krisha Lenzo, she's a Republican strategist and chair of the Metropolitan Republican Club. We thank you all for being here tonight. Shira, I'm going to start with you. You've covered Harris for a long time, going back to San Francisco. What's something that you're looking for tonight that maybe the rest of us who haven't covered her for, nearly a decade don't know?
Tonight, I'm really going to be looking for how does she get across her policy position? How does she help the American people know her, to connect with her? For a long time, she was sort of reticent to talk about her personal life, to talk about her family, to talk about her parents, but also her husband and her stepchildren. And so the more that she talks about herself, the more I'm always surprised. It's very, very new for her to be.
Is she a good debater? And I know you're an objective journalist, but I mean, how is her debate record?
Her debate record's pretty good. She's had some gaffes in the past, and something that I'm reporting on right now for the Chronicle is sort of how she has changed as a candidate just in the last 4 years. But
policy positions or just everything?
Not policy positions, more so how she is as a candidate. How does she talk to voters? How does she talk on the campaign trail? What message, what does she appear? Is she confident in what she's saying? That's something that I'm hearing from a lot of her current and longtime staff. But the thing that's really matters tonight is to understand, for voters to understand who she is. You were talking about a few minutes ago. Voters don't feel like they know her.
Yeah.
This is the biggest opportunity that she has other than the DNC.
Don, I want to turn to you. Harris has had a weekend full of debate prep. Advisors have been trying to lower expectations. We're just hours away from the start. What do you think is going to happen tonight?
I think Kamala Harris has to make it a show about her and the American people that's somehow facilitated through the moderator. She's got to talk directly to the people to both, number one, introduce herself, because frankly, nobody knows that much about any vice president in American history, but also to talk about her vision under a Kamala Harris administration and what Kamala Harris's America looks like. I think she would be best suited to not wrestle with the alligator that is Donald Trump. We have no idea what behavior he's going to get. Vivek Ramaswamy tried to clean it up, but there's no indication that he will act as a civil human being for the next 90 minutes when we've seen none of that for the last 10 years of his political presence in the states. So she's got to focus on the people and not be concentrating on the pivot back and forth with the chaos that he wants to invite and revel in. I think that's her mission, and it's a very clear one, to tell her story directly to the people and almost make him irrelevant.
Krisha, sometimes former President Trump has great debates, right? You can go back to the 2016 primaries where Republicans really loved the way he was debating. He captured some big moments there. I mean, there were some wild moments. And then there were other times when he debated Secretary Clinton, when he debated former President Biden, and then this last debate against President Biden. So what do you think is going to happen tonight, and which Donald Trump do you think we're going to see?
I think we will see the same Donald Trump that we have always seen. The first couple of minutes will be incredibly pivotal, but realistically, when it comes to Kamala Harris and the differences we'll see on the debate stage tonight, it will be stark, because unlike Donald Trump, who will be running on his record, Kamala is running on her empty words. Her policies continuously change, even up until a few days ago when she posted them online, stealing from Joe Biden's platform, stealing from Donald Trump's platform. We do not know what she stands for. It's very scary to think that this is one of the first extemporaneous interviews we've seen from her on the campaign trail. And it really, we have to hold her to account on all of her policy positions. And Donald Trump, I believe, will do that. While he's up against ABC News, I think he will come out strong because he is authentic, unlike Kamala, who, again, we have no idea what she stands for, although we do know, based on that ACLU 2019 report, that she is far more progressive than what she claims to be now, especially given Bernie Sanders' words, which he said the quiet part out loud, that she's basically going to be doing whatever she can to win the election.
Krisha, we thank you for that. Shira, are you surprised that she hasn't done more town halls, more engagement with voters, more unscripted moments, more interviews, or do you think this is sort of the strategy that you expected having covered her for so many years?
Yeah, I think this is a strategy I would expect. I would also say her campaign would probably argue she's done a lot of unscripted stuff. She does a lot of every city that she travels to go do a rally. She ends up stopping by a local business, having a little interaction, and those interactions are going mega viral for them on social media.
And maybe don't get covered enough by the other press, right?
Exactly. So I think they think what they're doing is working. I would love to interview. I'm sure plenty of journalists would love to see her talking more about her policies, talking more in depth. The CNN interview was helpful, but there's still a lot left to be talked about.
Don, you got the last word here. 30 seconds left. What's the one piece of advice you'd give Vice President Harris?
Run your race. It's not about the opponent tonight. You've got one opportunity to introduce yourself and have a direct conversation with the American people, and then you can have all the town halls and interviews you want after this. But this is your night. Go out there and kill it. Make him irrelevant, and that will get under his skin more than anything else she could do.
Don, Krisha, and Shira, we thank you all for being here. That's going to do it for this hour of our special coverage of the presidential debate. We are just moments away from that debate starting and our special coverage.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.